about 2000, so I'm saying 6 years. I got promoted in 97, so it must have been about 4 years later, 2000, 2001. I was sat there in the in an event planning office at Wembley with a colleague, and I was reading I don't know how it is in your police departments, but in the Met at that time, there were a whole raft of specialisms. So you could be a dog handler, you could be on the public order, the riot police, called Territorial Support Group, firearms, you could be explosive detection, EOD, you could be a marine policing unit, mounted branch. There was every speciality, and one of them was the helicopter. And I had seen in the 80s and 90s when I was on patrol, the Met had Bell Treble Twos. It was a great big helicopter with just two blades, and the noise was quite distinctive. And I can remember going to many a garden search and chasing suspects and seeing this helicopter come and speaking to the crew and thinking what an amazing job that must be. But I'd been told that was you had to have a commendation for bravery. You had to be traffic. You had to have had a traffic background, and it was very much, jobs for the boys. They hand pick you. Some hand comes out one day, taps you on the shoulder and says, "Come to air support." So I genuinely believed it was an inaccessible specialty for me. And I'm sat there in Wembley Police Station one day, and I was reading the notices, and it said, "We're looking for a sergeant for air support. These are the skills that you need to have." And I'm reading, I'm going, "Yeah, I can do that, and I can do that, and yeah, I've got that, and I can do that." So I remember chatting to this colleague of mine, a guy called Andy Hooper, and saying to him, I can do this, but I don't think there's much point, because still I've already worked out who they want. And he's the one who persuaded me to put an application in. And as it happened, I ended up going through a whole about 9 months worth of selection process, which was onerous to say the least. Lots of different little stages. So you had to do an exam. Then we did a load of hangar-based exercises. Then we did some video map to ground awareness stuff. Then we went off to RAF Cranwell and we did aircrew aptitude testing. Then we came back and eventually did a flight test in the helicopter where they looked at our aptitude. And then it ended up with an interview. And about 9 months later, I rolled out the other end in the number 2 slot with a really good friend of mine, John Gleeson, got the job. And it turned out that there was nothing between us at the interview. It was, literally half a mark or something on the marking scheme. And they put me on a select list, and they said, "Don't worry, we really like you. We'd like you to come up, but we haven't got any vacancies at the moment. Come back. If there's a job in the next 12 months, it's yours." And I remember about 11 months and a week into that 12 months, I got the phone call to say one of the sergeants on air support had been promoted and was leaving, and that was my posting. So having gone from believing it wasn't a job that was accessible to me to getting in to walk through the gates of Lippets Hill on the first day of my job as a air observer in those days, but we now kind of rebranded them as TFOs. But if it wasn't for Andy Hooper, I would have put that advert down. I would never have applied, and I'm absolutely convinced my police career would have taken a totally different direction. But it's like that with specialist postings. You have to have a bit of self-belief. You have to give it a go. Someone, as I've often said, you've got to be in it to win it. So I'm a living proof of that. I don't think I'm the best, but I think I put myself out there and I was prepared to jump through the hoops. And it was surprisingly low, the number of applicants. I mean, this makes it sound bad that I'm there was only 2 applied and there was 2 jobs, but it wasn't quite like that. But it was not at sergeant level. There were not the numbers that I expected there to be, and that was something where I found throughout my time running the air support unit is when I recruited, a lot of people were put off because they believed it was unattainable for them, and that to me was a real shame. I spent a lot of time trying to do recruitment days and just spread the word and try and get the very best talent to come through the door, but people. Everyone you meet says, "Oh, I'd love to do that job." And you say, "Well, would you apply?" "Oh, no, I'd never get it." And they don't bother.
The common
Met
theme
has everything to offer.
I think the common theme in most aviation units is exactly what you're saying. I think, oftentimes aviation unit's physically separated from the police department. So unless you know somebody that's in aviation, you really don't know what it takes to get there. And it's not that it's a secretive club. It's just, the physical location makes it difficult to communicate with. And in my department, it's difficult for us to get down to interface with the police officers that are working patrol because we don't have a place to land at the main station. And I think a lot of places have that trouble. So people, like you said, are just like, well, I guess it's not something that's attainable for me, so I'll just do something different, which in reality is far from the truth, So I agree with you.
The same struggle, was for us as well, was that, you're remote. The only time you go to the hangar is like if you're going out there to train with the SWAT team, like, for when you're a brand new officer or whatever, because we would do some training with SWAT. And then really you have no exposure. And I mean, for me, it was as lucky as I worked the area by the airport, and I ran into one of the air crews one night when they were getting food, and I was at the same restaurant, and that's kind of how, we started having a conversation, because again, just like Richard was saying, when you were working patrol and, the helicopter would come and assist on these calls, like you have no idea who these people are. And of course, most of the guys in the air unit are going to be fairly senior, guys on the department. So chances are you haven't worked with them ever in patrol. And, so you don't even know what these people even look like. I used to joke around with one of the guys that when I first started in the unit, he was saying how he would always ask me like, well, who's that on the radio? And, when I first started in the unit, I knew everybody's voices in patrol, and I'd be like, oh, this is so-and-so, that's so-and-so. Oh, I never heard of them. I'd never met them before. And I was like, man, you could probably get stopped like driving home from work and be like, oh, I work for the police department. And they'd be like, yeah, right, pal, get out of the car. Like they wouldn't even know who he was. And, we joked about it. And then after a few years of being in the air unit, it was the same way. I'd be flying with some, a new TFO, and they'd be, doing the same thing with me. They're like, oh, that's so-and-so on the radio. And I was like, never heard of him, So it's definitely a challenge, I think. And same thing, like you'd meet guys that were just like, I had no idea how to get into the air unit, where to even begin. And so it's incumbent on us in these units to, again, facilitate that and make an effort at some point to get out there and fly the flag of the aviation unit and show people that it's attainable and that they don't need to have experience. And, because I mean, anybody can come into the area. All it really takes is a good attitude to come in and be willing to learn something new and realize that, okay, hey, you might be, God's gift to law enforcement on the streets, but you're going to struggle at some point in, learning this job, because it is a very technical, it's not something that you just, go to a 2-week class and boom, the job. It's not like that at all. Yeah. So, sometimes you got to eat a little humble pie to figure out the job. And sometimes that can be, I think, daunting for a guy that maybe has been in patrol for, a handful of years and really knows what he's doing out there to take that leap of faith that, hey, I'm going to go to this, I'm going to challenge myself to this new skill set that is difficult. And like John said, it's not for everybody, but, I think some people are afraid to take that leap.